what it means to be well educated. Is your life too safe? I bet the answer is both yes and no. In our American culture, there's a lot of behavior that is risky and dangerous. You drink too much, you smoke or run a red light. You go weeks without ever exercising enough to make you breathe hard for 15 minutes. Those choices flirt with death. And we just do them. But do we ever do any risking where our brains are in gear? Do we ever consciously do something dangerous, not just because it's easy to do, but because we think it's right? It's scary to put out your arm and donate a pint of blood, especially if you've never done it before. It's scary to sign a television contract like this one here that I signed, programming where you state you'll produce a half-an-hour program every week for a whole season, especially when you've never done it before. And before StanCat, I had never done it before. It's scary to hold an opinion that none of your buddies hold. And I'm not just talking about you're thinking that a different football team is better than the one that they think is good. You know, no one ever gets hurt, killed, maimed when they're playing a computer game. And you're not in real danger, honestly, when you go to the movies. The popcorn and soft drinks offer you more danger than watching Claude Van Damme kill people on the screen. So what does this have to do with being well educated? What does it have to do with risking? Besides the ridicule that you may receive if they find out you're reading something a little bit higher up than a spy novel or a bodice ripper, the risk with being well educated is simply that when you read, for example, the great texts, you may get ideas, you may have understanding that will take your life up mountain trails that have no guardrails. You know, heroes are those men and women who have understanding and then dare to walk where their friends never dreamed of going. The central question of philosophy is that of metaphysics. Metaphysics, that's the study of the nature of reality, the nature of existence, the nature of our experience. And one aspect of our existence that seems to be with us every day is the question, the problem, the reality of evil. Whether you turn to the front page of the newspaper, it's there, or you find evil when you examine your own thoughts with regard to, say, some of your relatives, especially the rich ones, or the ones that seem to loaf around a lot. Envy, hate, lurk ubiquitously in the minds of men and women. And yet, how often do you hear about iniquity in a philosophy class? Modern philosophy seems to have dropped the word wicked from its vocabulary. There are people that are greatly evil. It doesn't take a lot of reading in history, for example, to scare up a list of a dozen greatly evil men. M. Scott Peck wrote, "Even if we cannot pity the evil for their inevitable ghastly old age." Let's stop there for a minute. If ghastly old age, if you've been busy hating your neighbors or hating other races or hating the Jews, or if you spent much of your life drinking hard or cheating on relationships or stealing from the stranger, how can you expect anything except ghastly old age if you make it that far? Now, continuing Peck's statement, even if we cannot pity the evil for their inevitable ghastly old age, or for the state of their souls after death, we can surely pity them for the lives they live of almost unremitting apprehension. What a description of the results of evil. Unremitting, almost unremitting apprehension.
If the central question of philosophy is metaphysics, then I wonder if the central question of science is how shall we diaper our little kids? If we worship at the feet of the great goddess Dia, the earth goddess, we have been told that it is a sin to use disposable diapers. Have the Gaia worshippers been telling us the truth? Here is what science has found. Disposable diapers hurt the environment a lot less than cloth diapers. Disposables require about half as much energy as cloth diapers. It takes, energy to run a washing machine, for example. And the savings over a year's time in using disposables is about the equivalent of 53 gallons of gasoline. Disposables, in addition, produce only half as much air pollution, 1/7 as much water pollution as cloth. But what about landfills? The greenies tell us we've got to save the landfills because the greenies tell us that most of the landfills will be filled in 10 years. That's indicative of their traditional half-truths. Landfills are traditionally designed to last about 10 years. In 2 years of digging into 7 landfills across these United States, a study team from University of Arizona sorted and weighed 16,000 pounds of garbage. Less than 1% is disposable diapers, they found. The nonsense of the Save the Earthers reminds me of what they fill diapers with.
Like my shirt? It's a yacht.
Competition and freedom, what gives us such a wonderfully high standard of living. And there's one place that I know of in our economy that's crying out for competition. The universities. Sky-high tuitions, many classes taught by teaching assistants, graduate students with only a few years older than the individuals they teach. Bloated budgets stuffed up with high-priced professors teaching 6 to 9 hours, not a day, 6 to 9 hours a week. Forbes magazine recently reported a trace of competition in the air for universities. They spoke about the 13 campuses of DeVries, that's D-E-V-R-Y, apostrophe S. That's a publicly traded company. No support from the government. No private donors. You can buy stock in that company. What a change. Their tuition, college tuition, is $3,000 a semester. That's less than a third of what it costs to go to Amherst or other la-di-da private schools. Less than a third. Competition. DeVries is offering bachelor's degrees, MBAs, and other graduate degrees. There's about 20,000 students currently enrolled. But DeVries does things that every university should be doing. They hold their school year-round. That means you graduate in 3 years rather than 4, or in the cases of many universities nowadays, 5 or 6. And boy, guess what? The educational establishment has been fighting DeVries tooth and nail with every dirty trick, it seems, that they can think of. First of all, they put up the rule that no school could be accredited if it was run by entrepreneurs, if it was run for profit. And without accreditation, of course, the students couldn't get any loans or grants. Finally, after the educational establishment could no longer argue with a straight face their silly argument that if you're for profit, you are automatically so inferior in terms of your educational delivery that you couldn't possibly have had accreditation. Finally, they dropped that argument, and DeVries was accepted for accreditation. Now DeVries, this last year, wanted to have campuses in New York State. So they submitted the official 300-page application to the State Department of Education. And currently, the State Department of Education in New York is evaluating, that's the quote word, evaluating their application. What for? Get this. This is according to Forbes. The Education Department is afraid that DeVries' presence in Manhattan and on Long Island might create undesirable competition with the existing institutions. What's so undesirable about competition? Choosing which books to read. Emerson had 3 rules for choosing good books. Reading at random just doesn't work. Reading the popular, easy stuff, the mysteries, the bodice rippers, the spy novels, reminds me of how kids will drink syrup straight from the bottle. It's sweet, it's neat, but come on. Emerson's first rule was to read books that are at least a year old. Let someone else be the avant-garde and read all the new trash that comes out and goes to the little social circles and goes, I know what the good books are, I know what the new books are. Let somebody else sort out the trash. His second rule was to read only the famous books, the great texts. There are so many of these kinds of books, and they have such a power to change who you are, to change the way that you look at the world. Why waste your time reading about shares tattoos. There are lots of lists of the great texts. I like the one Clifton Fadiman's Lifetime Reading Plan. I've had that book for years. It lists about 100 books that are what he considers the great texts. But there are lots of lists that you can consult. Emerson's final rule was read only what is enjoyable. Read only what you like. Wow! Did your teachers ever in school mention that third rule of Emerson's? I bet you they didn't. Okay, you ready? You approach, the shelves containing the great texts. I must say that you must approach it with a little bit of care and caution. These books, the great texts, are all different from each other. They're different in topic, they're different in style, they advocate contradictory things, and they're different in difficulty. Gulliver's Travels is a delightful book to begin with, one of the great texts. It has several layers of meaning. You can read it for its kiddie story stuff, but there are layers underneath it. But it's a lot easier to read than, say, The Life of Samuel Johnson by Boswell, which I'm reading right now. And Boswell's Life of Johnson is a lot easier to read than Alfred North Whitehead's Adventures of Ideas, which I've tried to start, but that's too hard for me right now. I read Gulliver's Travels as a kid, and I'm reading Boswell now. But if you need suggestions where in the great texts to start, if you're a novice at the whole business, why not great texts like Robinson Crusoe or Pilgrim's Progress or Aesop's Fables or Huckleberry Finn? There's 4 suggestions. Robinson Crusoe, Pilgrim's Progress, Aesop's Fables, and Huckleberry Finn. Those are easy places among the great books. And you'll find, even reading Huckleberry Finn, it has many layers of meaning. If you read it just as some boy drifting down the Mississippi River, you've just started at the top layer. When you read of Huckleberry Finn trying to decide, and he works several pages of debating, should I turn in my friend, my black friend, into the authorities, back to the master, where society said the black slave was just property? And Huckleberry Finn wrestles with the moral decisions of which way to go. It has more than one level, Huckleberry Finn, and all of the great texts do. And when you find an author that you enjoy, then read and read and read in that author all you can until you're filled, until the author becomes a part of you. And you'll grow with him or her, that author, in your soul. When I was a kid, I read lots of James Bond novels. I read them and read them and read them till I sort of got sick of them, because I had seen enough of what was there, and I moved on to something else. Someday I hope to be able to read Alfred North Whitehead's Adventures of Ideas, and I hope to read him with pleasure.
I would not live alway, I ask not to stay, where storm after storm rises dark o'er the way. The few lurid mornings that dawn on us here suffice for life's woes, are enough for its cheer. I would not live alway, no welcome the tomb. Since Jesus hath lain there, I dread not its gloom. There sweet be my rest till he bids me arise. to hail him in triumph, descending the skies.
Liebe und Arbeiten. That's what Freud said should be the two things that people should be able to do well. Liebe und Arbeiten. That's in German. English is to love and to work. If your children are able to Liebe und Arbeiten, love and work well, wouldn't you be well on your way toward being happy with them? Lots has been said about love, so let's talk a little bit about work. There's a little story about work. It's told by Margaret M. Stevens in her book, Prosperity is God's Idea. There was a man who died and found himself in a beautiful place, surrounded by every conceivable comfort. A white-jacketed man came to him and said, "You may have anything you choose, any food, any pleasure, any kind of entertainment." The man was delighted. And for days he sampled all of the delicacies and experiences which he had dreamed about on earth. One day he grew bored with all of it, and he called his attendant and he said, "I'm tired of all this. I need something to do. What kind of work can you give me?" The attendant sadly shook his head and replied, "I'm sorry, sir. That is the one thing we can't do for you. There is no work here for you." To which the man answered, "That's a fine thing. I might as well be in hell." The attendant said softly, "Where do you think you are?" Statistics. Do you ever hear bad arguments in favor of causes that you support? We tend to sort of just believe those arguments, statistical or otherwise, if they're going to support what we want them to support. But that's not the case for someone who is well educated. They listen to the reasoning, statistics and probability. And there's many fallacies that you have to learn about if you are to be well educated in my field, that of being a royal statistician. Let's take the case of 14-year-old girls who get married. Let's make it restricted to this country, and nobody's pregnant, and they're not doing it to get off of welfare. Many people would tend to feel that a 14-year-old girl is a little tad young to be marrying in this country under those circumstances. So they haul out their statistics studies and their newspaper articles. Some newspaper article might say, for example, that 14-year-old girls have a higher divorce rate than 36-year-old women, both of which are married. What's the fallacy? How are they putting one over on you when they say 14-year-old married girls have a higher divorce rate than 36-year-old married women? The first year of marriage is a dangerous year for divorce. How many 14-year-old married girls are in their first year of marriage? How many 36-year-old married women are in their first year of marriage? Pretty neat trick, huh? Death, brought to you by the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Death. There are those that look at me and repress my existence.
banish me from their thoughts, if they can. Like Henry David Thoreau, who said, "O God, to have reached the point of death only to find that you have never lived at all." But alas, for me as death, there are those who face me and see through me. Teilhard de Chardin was one of those. I, death, remained real to him, but I could not hold his spirit. Hear his words as he looked into my face. He said, "I am losing hold of myself and am absolutely passive in the hands of the great unknown forces that have formed me. In all those dark moments, grant, O God, that I may understand that it is you, provided only my faith is strong enough, who are painfully parting the fibers of my being in order to penetrate to the very marrow of my substance and bear me away within yourself."
Political science, the study of how government orders and affects our lives. An organization called Change New York made a study of welfare in New York. They found out that the typical welfare recipient is a mother with 2 children, an unwed mother with 2 children. So far, nothing new. We knew that, at least we felt we did. But then they added up what this non-working mother receives annually from the city and the state and the federal government. In cash, in Medicaid, in housing assistance, and so on. The total that this individual receives, this typical welfare recipient, is $32,500 each year. Wow. And since these benefits, as Murray Rothbard points out, are not taxed, that $32,500 is equivalent to you or I earning $45,000 annually. As Change New York points out, it would be cheaper to send each welfare recipient to Harvard, all expenses paid, than to maintain them on government welfare. Wow! Isn't our government working wonderfully?